Hi, Jonathan. I saw you sent a documents about LOD.
LOD, it's one of those catchphrases that we use, one of those three-letter abbreviations like BIM or RFI or one of those things. I was interested in this because it talked about levels of development. And to me, it's something that we do naturally, but this document then started to put in place the concept of actually doing your documentation in your computer using a conscious understanding of levels of development. I think that one of the examples they used was, for example, we're going to draw the walls. We know that the
Yeah.
building has walls, so we create a zone for the walls. We don't know exactly how thick the walls are going to be at the beginning, but we could create a zone. So we could say maybe we'll have drywall 10 millimeters, then we'll have some studs, maybe 140s. We know that in this environment, we're going to need to have exterior insulation, or we know that we're going to use 140 studs and we're going to have something on a veneer. So we know that the ventilated cavity is going to be at least 20 millimeters. So you could actually quickly add that all up and then say, okay, we've got a zone of 180 millimeters. Let's draw with that zone. And particularly, now this was from a company called Vectorworks, and they make a CAD program, a BIM program. And the beauty of using the Vectorworks, and other programs do the same thing, but the beauty of using a wall style is that you can say, okay, the zone is 180 millimeters. I'm not going to worry about putting in all the components. But later on in the design, when we get to the next level of development, we can then start breaking that wall down once we've designed it. I've always said that if you're not careful in the early stages of the design, you end up front loading your design work. So you start, instead of starting with a zone of a wall, quite often we start with a wall style, and we know that it's got interior lining, and we know that it's got timber studs, and we know that it's got some cladding. And then we start to think about the cladding on the outside really too early for this. If we use this concept of LOD, we're starting the design of the cladding too early, and we don't give ourselves the money, or we don't apply the money we're getting from the client at the right time. So if we start thinking of the exterior cladding too early, before, what's the LOD? LOD 200, schematic design. So we don't know what the wall cladding is. But
Yeah.
why spend money in designing something that later on we might change? We could just give ourselves a 200 millimeter zone, an 8-inch zone, and say, that's the wall. Interior walls, 4.5 inches. We know that we can fit whatever we need to fit within that zone and then work around it. If it was an apartment building, and recently I was looking at an apartment project where there was about 200 apartments into an existing concrete frame building. Now they know that they need to have inter-tenancy walls between. So you could look up the JIB catalog and say, oh yeah, if we put 200 between the apartments, we've got plenty of room to put in an inter-tenancy zone or an inter-tenancy wall. But we don't want to do that now because we haven't been paid by the client to take that level of development. And so to me, it seemed that we have this ability to go through LOD 200, schematic design, where we don't know what everything is, but we're setting up zones for things. Now, to me, the schematic design is beyond concept design. So the concept's been organized. And in the past, I think we would have called this developed design.
Yeah, that's the word.
They call it schematic design, but I think we would have called it developed design because we're starting to resolve the outline structure.
Yeah.
Not the detailed structure, but outline. So that we know that, for example, if we know that if there's a veranda, we need a beam to support the veranda rafters. That if there's a large opening, we know there's going to have to be a lintel somewhere down the track. If it's a commercial building, at this stage, we would be having things like, where's the risers for our services? So if we have our good schematic design and we include the risers, we can give that IFC model to our mechanical, electrical, plumbing consultant, and they then know where the risers are. They can then start to put the stuff in place so that when we go to detailed design, we can then get their IFC model back. We can put it into our project, and then we can start to see whether there are any clashes. We can start doing clash detection, but that would be at LOD 300 once we get into detailed design. Now, LOD 350 is the coordination model, which sort of suggests that we're sending the 300 model, the LOD 300, to our consultants for their work to go on. But I suspect that we should be using maybe more like the LOD 200 to send that away. Or do you think the 300 is the right time to do that?
I'm not so sure because I used to work in BIM project, and at the time it was 8 years ago. Although at the time was BIM was relatively matured, but it also depends on the experience of the clients and the consultant involved. And at the time, I did in Singapore. At the time, there was no contract supporting BIM coordination as well. So nobody know how to contractually what version. In for that project, we use Revit. Revit, as you may know, if you use, let's say, 2026 version, you can't downgrade to 2025. The project lasts for 6 years. So people go, how can you control? And what would be the end product? So LOD is one thing, and also versions, the contract is one thing. That was a contractual challenge as well, and coordination challenge as well. So initially, I joined that project halfway, and there was a BIM model. Initially, the client doesn't want BIM model, so there was no BIM at all. It was built and designed with CAD drawings. After that, the client say, okay, because this is a government project and it's an infrastructure project, and for the facility management purpose, we want to have a BIM model, and they said they want to coordinate. The coordination will be better because it has proven in other projects, so they want to use BIM. They want us to develop BIM model, so it's additional to the project. But even though it's additional to the project, they have no idea what kind of LODs they want. So at what point of the time, and what kind of LOD they want, what kind of version they want, what software they want us to do. And so a lot of challenges there in practical terms. And also who can review from the client team. Also, clients has not so many people who can review the model. So what usually happened was the consultant, it was a design and build project, so consultant was hired by us. So consultant, designer, or draft persons had to show them, okay, this is the coordinations, how we do that. Are you happy about that? So we had to go into that way. And another thing is when it goes to LOD applications and installations, there are subcontractors, the contractors from all over the world, let's say, because this is the power distribution building, so Siemens or other projects, and they came together and they draw it in. But it also has was it IP issue, intellectual property issue, and how details they want is also getting challenged by them. If you don't define properly from the start of a contract, and okay, we can say that okay, this area there will be distribution boards, but when you click it, when you click the model, what do you want to see? Are you going to see 2D drawings, or do you want to link it, or how do you want to do that? And there are a lot of challenges we had encountered for the BIM, because ultimately they say, okay, at the end we want LOD 500 as built drawing, right? So as built drawing, okay, but sometimes they just read by the books and say that okay, LOD 500 as built drawing. So what kind of details you want? For example, when you model a door with all the ironmongery, right? Is one. Do you want to make sure like ironmongery is one items, or you want to do and door is one elements, or hinge are different elements, doorknobs is one element, and how details you want. So they need to they need to have a taxonomy to define which one they want to do. So a lot of exercise and a lot of systems they need to involve to call for what LOD include what kind of details, and to make expectation is right. Otherwise, they keep from the client side, they keep on coming back and say that, okay, this is not as part of the contract, you haven't met LOD 500. So if you're a contractor, it's hard to manage because the project, let's say project has completed, has built situations, and all the contractor left the projects. How would you do? So that's what happened to my project 8 years ago.
It sounds to me like you're saying that the project started one way and ended up at
Yeah,
LOD 500 without defining along the way what was
yeah,
expected.
yeah,
And to
yeah,
me, I think that if we're going to use the level of development in a project, you really have to be careful to define what each stage means. Now, the document that we're reading is this document from Vectorworks. The link's in the show notes.
yeah,
It's really just, it's not defining exactly what's meant by these terms LOD 300 and
yeah,
LOD 400 and LOD 350 coordination model, that actually there's a lot of flexibility for more definition in that area. As you say, if we're going to do LOD 500, what does that actually mean? Now, the client and the consultant should really have agreed this way before you get to the stage.
yeah,
Because if as built includes the details, that means that the model has to be updated to show clearly what those details are as they are constructed on site. And that might mean moving a column 50 millimeters. It might mean changing the flashing material. What level of
yeah,
detail do you need to go to? And your one about the door and the ironmongery is a really good one because, as you say, is the door one element that actually has information about the ironmongery, or is the ironmongery a separate object in its own right? And that can be a huge difference in the amount of work you have to do.
yeah,
I think that the concept of level of development is nice and easy, but probably what we'll find very much like BIM, and that is that each company has its own definition of exactly what LOD 300 means and
yeah,
LOD 350, what that actually means. So I was having a read through it and I made some notes just in case we didn't cover it right at the beginning, Ethan. LOD
yeah,
stands for level of development, although some people think this refers to the level of detail. In a way, you can see a similarity between these two, that the level of development defines the specifics of both the geometry and the data associated with each model element and helps to determine how much information is available at any given stage, which sounds a lot like how much detail is involved in that particular object. So to me, to start with, I got a little bit confused with LOD being level of development and level of detail. So this white paper was written by Vectorworks and to show how Vectorworks supports the level of development in the various stages. So it is that they're pushing their barrow, if you like. They're trying to promote their software. But as I read through it, it's easy to use a zone for a wall and later on specify what the construction of that wall is. And we talked about that right at the beginning. Having the level of development is a really good idea because we tend to get into too much detail early in the project, which is what I think I said earlier on, thereby wasting effort and wasting money when it turns out that the project has different constraints or the clients make changes to the cladding, for example. Now, I think I gave the example building, we're going to build a project that's going to have concrete wall. It's going to be maybe 250, 300 millimeters thick. This allows the structure and the insulation. We don't know how big the wall is, but if you set a zone later on, you can, as we get the wall gets to LOD 300, there's room to put that detail in and then modify the design. Some programs use styles or families for objects. So it could be a style or a family, and then as more information is known, that style is then edited and the additional information. So I think Revit uses families, which I think means that we can then have a wall style, and then later on you can update that family and all the walls will change accordingly.
yeah,
But it does mean that you've got to be quite specific and you've got to make sure that you use a system right at the beginning of the project to make it easy to make that change with the LODs. So there's a couple of things here. We've got the links for the show notes. I also found something else, which was levels of development from somewhere else, not just from Vectorworks. And I started to think, Ethan, you're still teaching the Diploma of Architectural
yes,
Technology.
yes.
I've stopped now. But if we were teaching this diploma, should we include these levels of development as part of the course?
Yeah,
Because
we can introduce the students.
just particularly introduce them to the concept of level of
Yeah.
development, and we could use it.
Yes.
We could use it as part of our teaching, so that in the course that you and I used to teach, the Con 5706, which is drawing one, in this course, the LOD stages could be covered in concept, so the student understands what the level of the development is and when it's appropriate. And this would help when they get to the documentation paper, which was Cons 5708, as they would know how much information is required, and it would also help in preliminary design and scoping, so they could focus on LOD 200. That is the, what do they call it, schematic design. In the construction paper, what's that, Cons 5005, we should really cover some details to the level of LOD 400, and it could be specific so that the student knows when it's appropriate to have LOD 350 and when it's appropriate to have LOD 400. And there's also that course, I keep calling it the BIM course. What's it called? Visual Design and Development or something? Or
Visual Design and Construction, VDC.
Visual Design and Construction. So that paper should certainly cover the levels of development. There should be lessons on LOD in that paper. I'm not sure if there is, but if there's not, there really should be. So I just thought that having read this about LOD, we could actually introduce that so the students start to hear us talking about, instead of talking about concept design and develop design, we could start using the phrases LOD 200, LOD 300, so that the student starts to associate those phrases with where they go in the industry. Now, the danger, of course, is that they then finish a diploma, they go into the industry and work for someone who's drawing on a drawing board by hand, and they have no idea what LOD is, or they might go and work for someone that's using AutoCAD like an electronic drawing board. Again, they don't understand that concept. But I think in the future, it would be really good for our students to know that.
Yeah, because they have a long future to go, 40, 50 years to go after the
Yeah.
finishing the school. Yeah, they will encounter a lot of changes. Let's see.
So to me, I thought that's what we should cover. We should make sure that the course covers that.
Yeah, yeah. All right. I think that's
Well,
good.
thanks for your
That's for
time,
now.
Ethan.
Yeah, thank you. And see you next week. And
All
please
right.
like and subscribe our Spotify.
Yeah, don't forget to hit the notification so that you get notified every time we put a new Spotify.
All right. Bye.
See you, Ethan.
See ya.